Hi, Intuitive viewers. Welcome back. And I want to also welcome back my Cassie Carey. Hi,
Hello.
Cassie.
Hi.
So everybody know, I think most people know you on the channel, but if people are new, this is my daughter, Cassie, and she used to be a big part of the channel until she moved to the UK to study
Yeah.
film. And because of coronavirus, we haven't seen her in a year, which has broken my heart. But we're going to see her in a couple of months. So we're excited about that. So hi, Cassie, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So the reason Cassie's on, and I usually just, she's a busy gal, so I just try to bring her on when, I feel like we have something that really the channel might be very interested in. When Cassie and I have our chats, we chat every day,
Yeah.
but we were talking about Cassie's channel, which we're going to get to in a second, but she made a couple changes to her channel, and we got into a conversation about good and evil. And I thought the way that it was going, I was kind of like, okay, why don't we talk about this on the channel? Because I think people would really want to be part of the conversation. And so hopefully it'll get a conversation going in the chat or in the comments, and we can hear what other people think. And there's Lucy walking around trying to figure out where to
I was
bury.
gonna say, I'm like, does she do that with all your interviews?
She's got a cigar. No, she's just. I think she hears you, Cassie. So I think she's just
Oh,
doing it.
okay. Yeah. So she's just walking around.
But so Cassie, why don't we start by you telling people the change that you made to your own YouTube channel and why?
Well, I decided to focus more on true crime because I really am interested in that subject. I'm interested in that genre as well in film.
Mhm.
And I kind of changed it to that because I felt like I needed something a bit more specific rather than just overall film and television shows. Like it just felt too broad of a
Right.
subject, and I felt like I needed to kind of narrow my focus because I started it because of my blog, which, doing just films and TV, that was fine, for that. But then once I started to do a YouTube channel, I just felt like it was just too big, of a subject, or not really a subject, but it was just too big of a topic, that I
Right.
needed to kind of narrow it down a bit. So I'm doing basically mixing true crime with film, like analysis. So
Right.
yeah.
And so and within that, so let's talk about the first episode that you're doing within this new kind of vein that you're
Hmm.
kind of doing for your channel, because
Yeah.
that's where it kind of gets interesting, because you had kind of a spirit experience when you were doing the video.
Yeah.
But so why don't you tell people that, so the first video you did is the movie Sid and Nancy, which is
Hmm.
about Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen, their relationship. He was in the Sex Pistols and
Hmm.
he murdered her
Yeah.
basically, and then if
Or we
he died
kind of
of
don't
the
know what happened. I mean,
right,
it's pretty obvious he did it, but it
right,
is one of those things where the evidence was completely just useless because people kept coming in and out of the apartment when it happened, and so nobody really knows. And it was just kind of, I believe it's kind of when like DNA was starting to become a thing. So it was just kind of messed up. And I think you kind of have an idea, but it's never been concrete.
right. It also happened at a time. Well, why don't you tell people what the story is, just really briefly, what their story is, so they can follow us when we're talking about it.
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, Sid Vicious was in the Sex Pistols, punk rock band in London, England, or just, UK in general. And punk rock, they were kind of with the punk rock movement when it was just starting to become a thing. Um, and it was kind of during a time in the UK that people were having a really hard time finding jobs, and the economy was doing terribly. And it was just a really, after like the swinging 60s, it just, the 70s and 80s were just a really hard time for England.
Bleak.
Margaret Thatcher was in as well, which made things harder. So it was just, it was kind of like this rebellion in a way, kind of what we're seeing now in a way, but it was with music rather than just protests and stuff. It was more, they were rebelling with music. And I guess kind of like Vietnam, because
The
Vietnam
60s,
kind of
yeah.
had a similar thing where they kind of rebelled with music and art and stuff, and tried to do, they weren't, and punk rock wasn't exactly peaceful like the like flower power movement, but
Right.
they did use music more than they did
Right. It was
violence, I
it's
think.
expression of an artistic expression,
Yeah,
of their what was
yeah,
going on at the time. And so they had this relationship, and she was kind of like a groupie. She kind of just hung around
yeah,
band,
yeah.
and they met and kind of had this relationship for a very short time, actually,
It was
right?
like 19 months, I think they
Yeah.
said. So a bit less than 2 years, I think.
Right.
um I think so. I think a bit less than 2 years, but yeah, and they were really young as well. Because when you look at the pictures, you think that like, oh, they look like they're in their late 20s or early 30s, but no, they're like, she was 20 when she died and he was 21, so
So
pretty
young.
young,
So young.
younger than me. So
They were together, they were hardcore drug addicts addicted to
mhm,
heroin.
yeah,
Right. And then
yeah, and just kind of every drug.
every
But
drug.
heroin is
Right.
kind of what made it quicker, I think, than
Right.
it probably, I think they probably would have died from a drug, or he would have died from a drug overdose anyway, because she didn't die from drug overdose, but
Right.
he probably would have anyway. Um, but I think heroin just kind of sped up the process a bit,
Right.
because
Right.
it's just such a hard drug.
Right. And she was also had a history of mental illness as
Hmm.
well. We know, and now we kind of think it was probably schizophrenia, right? She was finally diagnosed with that.
Yeah, well, she was diagnosed with it in high school, I think.
Okay.
And it's weird because it was one of those things where they didn't know like what was wrong with her for the longest time. And by the time she got officially like diagnosed, it was a little bit too late. They couldn't
Right.
really help her. And she was almost 18 at that point. So it's like, all right, I guess we can just try to support her the best we can and,
Right.
just let her do her own things. We can't, unless we put her in a mental institution, which they didn't really want to do because mental institutions back then were not very
Right.
nice
Not the
places,
best.
so, and they wouldn't be for a while at that point, like around like the 60s and 70s. So yeah,
Right. And so they both ended up dying very, very young. And they're kind of
yeah,
are kind of a they kind of call them the punk Romeo and Juliet because
yeah, yeah.
she died of a stab wound from him,
Mm-hmm.
potentially.
We're yeah.
And then he died a couple months later from a drug overdose, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, like only I think she passed away in October and he passed away in February.
Okay.
So it was
So just a few
really,
months later.
really close together. Yeah.
And BTW, her mom's book is fantastic. If you
It's
haven't read
really
it,
good.
it's called I Don't Want to Live This Life. And it is
Yeah.
a page turner. She does such a good job at
Yeah.
really summing up a family's just struggle with mental illness,
Mm,
her daughter's whole life, and then the
yeah.
tragedy of her death. It's such a fantastic book. She does such a good job with it. But that's what it's called. If you want to really, have something to do for a couple days, it's
Yeah.
you will not be able to stop reading it.
It's just such a, you can't believe by the end that she was 20 years old because she like
Right.
lived like 3 lifetimes.
Right.
It's like Judy Garland as well, where it's like you're just exhausted by the time it ends because you feel like you've lived a dozen lifetimes because it's just
Exactly.
so hard.
Exactly. It is that. And so, okay, so you've made this change to the channel, and this is the first one you're doing. And
Hmm.
while you're making it, you call me midway and say, "Mom, I think I'm seeing orbs on my as I'm filming this."
Yeah.
And so kind of talk about what you realized about the orbs and where they appear, what you're talking about when they kind of appear.
Well, so I kind of saw, I think I saw it while I was filming, but I didn't really notice it. I kind of thought it was one of those things where you like when you look really quickly and you see like a bit of dust
Hmm.
and stuff in it,
Hmm.
so I thought it was
The
something
corner of
like
your
that. It was
eye.
just like an eye thing,
Uh-huh.
So I didn't really pay attention to it, but it wasn't until I was editing it. And it was the part with the murder that I just kept seeing orb after orb. And I was not sure at first because I thought maybe it might have been dust at first, but then there was this one orb. I don't think it's in the video now because I have like edited it,
You
but
edit it, yeah.
I'm not sure if it's in the video, but that was really quick. That I'm when I saw it, it was just like boom, like that, and I thought like there's no way that that's dust. Like dust does not move that quickly.
Right,
And there was
right.
one I think you pointed out that was going up as well, which again, dust doesn't kind of goes down. It doesn't go up, So
Yeah, no, no, no. And it after working with so many orbs or seeing so many orbs, they have a way that they move that's very different than anything, than a bug or dust or anything like that. It's a different kind of movement. There's a fluidity to it that you
yeah.
just don't see in like dust um, or in bugs and things like that. It looks very different.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I saw that and yeah,
it was
and I
during the
saw it
murder,
mainly when we were
right?
talking about when I was talking about the murder. I saw it a little bit beforehand, but it was just like crazy by the time I talked about that. It was just like every other second I was just getting orbs coming down.
Right,
You probably during that portion you can probably spot it if you're like looking closely.
right.
So I think a couple orbs were left in there because I just couldn't edit it out.
And you kind of said to me, can you tune in and see who you think this is?
Mm,
Um, and when I tuned in and I use the with you, I use the tarot card sometimes to just validate because I'm your mom, and
yeah, yeah.
I'm always just very careful because I don't want I know how biased that I can be with you. So
Mhm.
I use it just as validation. But um but what we surmised was that it was Sid Vicious, and
Mm.
what's to say his real name was Simon or something, but it
Yeah,
was
yeah, it was like John Simon Ritchie.
right.
It was, yeah.
And he was so pleased that someone was laying out the murder as it happened, because I
Mm,
think that you in the what you talk about is that you think inadvertently the film actually kind of got it right, and that
yeah.
you feel that's what happened too. And I think when you were talking about that, it was almost like he was confirming, because to me it was very the feeling that I had with the orb was very thankful and very positive.
Mm,
And it was like in support of, it was in support of what you were doing. So
yeah. Well, and
right.
I got a comment. If for some reason it didn't show up on my YouTube channel. I'm not sure why. Sometimes it does that, but I got this one comment. It was like one of the first comments on the video that asked, like, do you get like I guess spirits coming in when you're doing like when you're writing and doing these videos?
Mm, mhm, mhm.
Do you get like inspiration? And I think definitely with writing, and I've always gotten that with writing. So, and I do with this series kind of have to use a mixture of like what I see with facts and my own instincts with stuff,
Right,
because there
right.
are a lot of cases where it's like you don't know what happened.
You don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And a lot of those are films because they have intrigue, so you'll
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
do several of those. But yeah, I can't wait to see what you do. And do you want to tell people what you're working on right now, the other episode you're working on?
I'm working on so I'm kind of basing it around the film I, Tanya, which I love. Is one of It's like one of my favorite films of all time. And it's on the Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan scandal. So I'll be looking into like the history of that and just the actual story with that, and what kind of the film gets right, gets wrong, and how it uses like film language and film symbolism to convey the story, which is what I did with Sid and Nancy, you know.
Right. Well, so so this is the part where I wanted to kind of involve the community, because we started talking about Sid Vicious as just a person and saying that, you know, he was 21 years old.
Yeah.
And I was saying that when I was a kid, I remember the punk movement. I was probably about 8 or something, and it totally freaked me out. I mean, I saw images on, and I didn't understand it at
I
all.
mean,
I
it
was
is
like,
scary when you look at the
yeah,
pictures. They're really violent, you know, and they're very, and there's some pictures I couldn't put on the channel because I'm just like, nobody wants to see this. This is really
nobody wants to see
disturbing.
that.
Yeah.
Well, and I was like, you know, white girl from the suburbs, like
Yeah.
it just like, so,
And
you
all you
know,
knew was the hippie movement, you know,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
free
I was, and
love.
I've always been kind of a hippie, so I was just like, what is this weird, what is it? I didn't even understand it at all. It did not resonate with me at all. And I remember seeing them like covered in blood, like, you know, safety pins through their face and through their ears. I was just like, what
Very
is going
angry
on?
movement.
But I was very angry. Yes, exactly. Very angry. And, but what I was talking about, um, in this, it was like a little, like just news thing talking about him and saying, you know, that he was so bad and he was so evil and he was so,
Right.
you know, all of these things. And um, it was weird because when I looked at him, I didn't get that vibe from him, you know, because I saw that footage, and I was small, I was little. I mean, I was
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
about maybe, like I said, between 8 and 10 or something
Mhm.
years old. And I saw them walking him from, I think you have that footage actually, walking him from like the jail to a car or something,
Right.
and thinking, he's not bad. I was just,
Mhm.
that's just like the thought that came into my head.
Yeah.
But
That's
I
interesting.
think part of it was that, uh, you know, I think in our society, so often people try to sum up people as good or bad. They use the word evil a lot. And I
Yeah.
was telling you that I hate that word because I think it's so lazy just to say somebody is evil,
Yeah.
because they can commit evil acts, of course, but people are complex and
Mm.
they always have a story. And I think it's part of our spiritual evolution to be able to see
Mm.
that people aren't just black and white. It's part of our spiritual growth to see that people have a story, and there's somewhere where this started for him.
Yeah.
And so we kind of talked about that, and how even in like in Wicked and things like that, you're starting to even see them take uh classically evil, you know, quote unquote evil characters, and look at their origin story, because we're starting
Yeah.
to understand that, I think, as a society, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, and look at Breaking Bad as well. I mean, that's literally the entire show is about, you know, a person going from A to Z, you know, and being
Right.
like completely harmless, non-threatening to someone really scary and really, you know, what people would consider evil.
Right. Right. And that show is particularly, I think it's so clever because you are you're with him the whole way.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
allow you to get unconnected to him from that very
Mhm.
beginning. And so you're right. That is a great, I don't know, a great just story of someone going, like you said, from A to Z.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, with kind of going back to Sid Vicious, I feel like um, there's, when somebody is summed up by some big act that they did, I think it's hard for people to go back and see anything else. With like OJ, we knew him before. We knew
Yeah.
him from the beginning, and I think that's why it was hard for them to accept the murder
Yeah.
and stuff and all of that stuff. Allegedly, I guess we have to say allegedly, found innocent.
He
But I
didn't
think,
do it.
yeah,
He has to
but I think
describe how he didn't do it.
Exactly. He did a whole book about how he didn't do it. but it, I think that was why it was so hard for people to accept that this was what had happened.
Yeah.
But when you know someone from their evil act only, like most people weren't following the punk movement, so they heard about this evil act and thought, this guy's evil. He did this. He killed this woman.
Yeah.
And the crime scene was horrific. And I'll let people go to your channel and see what was.
Yeah, and they can
but
see that.
But people surmise, well, he's just evil. He's just awful. But
and then you
really
see the pictures of the punk movement, and you think like,
right.
what the hell is this?
What's going on?
You'd think it was like Satan, like worshipers or something, something
really,
along
it does.
those
It has
lines,
that. Yeah, it has that. And it really, and first of all, you realize, it was kind of all an act. There was, I mean, he was involved in that movement, and he was a lost soul for sure. But it was they really played up anything bad they did, anything obnoxious they did. They would play it up in interviews and stuff. And so there really was that aspect of like, it's a show.
Yeah.
But so you have that, but also you go back to his childhood, and it was like complete poverty. His mother was a drug addict. His mother was a prostitute, we think, or maybe.
I can't remember if she was or not, if they said, or if that's something that isn't quite known.
Okay.
The biggest thing is that she just moved around a lot and had kind of guys in and out of her life.
Right. Okay.
But
very, very, very unstable life, and unstable in every way. Economically, mother wasn't around, no father figure, just very drifty, and fell into this kind of thing that he just kind of had to ride because he had no other prospects.
Yeah.
And he was a very sweet guy, but he wasn't really super bright. He was, no offense. I think it was probably the drugs too, but he wasn't like the other guy in the band, Johnny Rotten. He was very bright. He was more just kind of a regular, go on to get along guy.
He was immature as well.
Kind of fell into this lifestyle. What's that?
He was immature as well.
What did you say? Yeah. Well, I think when you do drugs early, it is kind of arrested development kind of situation.
It stunts your growth.
Yeah. And so, but he was clearly not an evil person, but I think that is so common for us to do that. And I think we saw it a lot through like the Trump administration and I think what would bother me when people would say like, this person's evil, Stephen Miller's evil, Donald Trump is evil. They did evil acts for sure, but to sum them up as evil in some way, for me, it feels like it lets them off the hook in some way. And I don't want to do that. As though they didn't have control over their decisions and what they did, and they did. So, and I also think it does us a disservice to not be able to understand these people so that we can stop it at some point. Or recognize it, have it not happen again. When you just say people are evil, that puts everyone at a disadvantage and it lets them off the hook. Do you think that's true?
Yeah. And I think especially now with like protests and stuff, there is a habit I've noticed people have gotten into more of saying this person's bad and this person's good, and I think, and people do compare it to like, they do say like, oh, it's like a witch hunt, but in some ways it is, because that's what like the Salem witch trials and witch hunts were about, was this person's bad, get mad at this person, we're all good, we're not evil. And I think it can be good if you do it the right way, but I think the way that it's going now, it's just too much. You need to have some balance and get people a bit more and realize there's a gray area and it's not black and white.
Right. Some nuance. Now, I have to admit myself, there are some cases, there are some people where I'm just like, I'm not there yet. Like with the George Floyd, this thing going on right now, that in the trials going on right now. I can't, like, I can't,
Yeah.
I've seen very little of it. I just kind of catch up on the news because I want to know what's happening, but I can't with the trial. I want to, you know, the level of anger I have looking at that cop sitting there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, it's unbearable to me. And so clearly with that guy, it's like, I don't even want to know his story right now. I don't want to know
Right.
anything about
Right.
him. I am in that, camp where it's just like, that is just a horrible, human being. I'm
Yeah.
not there yet. So I understand that. And I think that, and I do think it takes a lot of ability to see nuance to be able
Yeah.
to deal with what I think people that hurt animals, there are levels that I have real difficulty in being like, I don't even want to know that guy's story. But I
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
realize that that's a failing on, I guess, on my part in a lot of ways, because I we can't stop it if we don't know what's going on. We can't,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if we don't just want to ignore it and not understand it, we can't really avoid it next time. We
Yeah.
have to know, we have to be curious and interested. And it doesn't mean that they get off the hook in any way. They still go to
Yeah.
jail forever or whatever. But what do you think about? I mean, what do you?
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of like with serial killers too, that every time I like see cases with them, there's usually very few of them that I'm like, oh, they're just jerks. They're just jerks and they had it easy and they're just weird. But even then I think to myself, oh, it's mental illness. That's
Yeah.
what it is at the end of the
Mhm.
day. But all of them, all of them, every single one of them, they always reached so many points where somebody could have stepped in and said, this kid needs help. This person needs help. What are the parents doing? What are they doing? This is weird that what they're doing at school so many times. But because they don't want to go there and they, see those things that they do as evil, or I guess sinful, in some ways, they don't get help. They're just
Right.
kind of ignored a bit, like, oh, let's not pay attention to that, almost kind of living in it. I guess ignorance is bliss in a way.
Yeah.
And it does
Yeah.
fail like a lot. I mean, you see it with the school shootings as well,
Mhm.
where so many of those kids, they had problems. Nobody could see it though, or nobody wanted to see it. They have
Right.
problems. So I think it does kind of blind us in a way, not wanting to deal with that kind of stuff blinds us.
Yeah. I think you're right. And yeah, a lot of the, at least the first school shootings, and I'm
Yeah.
sure some subsequently started with a lot of bullying and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and immature kids that either couldn't reach out for help or didn't know how, or didn't know they could, and then they
Yeah.
have access to a gun.
Hmm.
um you know
Yeah.
you think the level of helplessness and anger, and then you hand the kid a gun, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
and they don't have the maturity to
Mm.
go steps ahead and say, well, if I do this, then this will happen, they don't have
Yeah.
that brain development yet to be able to do that, to see sequences of events
Yeah. And they might
yet.
have mental illness that doesn't allow them to
Right.
think that way. If they have like something like narcissism or antisocial like personality
Mhm.
disorder, that they literally can't put themselves in other people's shoes, then it's like, yeah, like of course they're going to do something like that, especially if they're angry.
Right. And I realize, like, I know that some people might be watching this and being like, that person's evil, and this person, and I know controversial like subject matter, because people are still so angry at, like,
Yeah.
Donald Trump and the Trump administration. They want justice, and we should have justice. And it's kind of separate from that. I guess I'm looking at it more as, like you said, with when you look at people like on death row, we've seen those stories about, people on death row that have been on Netflix and stuff. And like you said, when you go back through their life, there were so many points where they
Yeah.
could have been helped, could have been
Oh
stopped,
yeah.
could have been figured out, could have gotten help. and it doesn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't happen. And so it snowballs, it escalates.
Yeah.
And I think if we go even with Donald Trump, and I feel like I'm away from him enough now, I can say, how could he have been normal with the upbringing he's had? And not that he's not off the hook for anything he's done.
Yeah.
He's got to go to jail. I think
Yeah.
we've got to have justice. We've got to know what happened. We've got to understand this. But he had the weirdest upbringing with the
Oh
weirdest
yeah.
family, the weirdest dad. Everything rotten he did, he got praise for from his family. I mean, how could he have been normal?
Yeah.
I don't know,
And yeah, hasn't had any consequences for anything too. Like,
Right, right.
and he's
Well,
been
that's
was given money and stuff to start his own business. And even when it failed, he was just bailed out. Or,
again, and again, that is kind of a societal failing, right? We don't really hold people accountable when when they do crimes like that, when they're like
yeah,
white collar crimes, because it feels like, well, who, it's just money, it's like
yeah,
it's not of consequence for some reason, or they have the lawyering, they can lawyer up and get out of it.
yeah,
But you're right. It's partly a failing on not only his own family for not holding him accountable for stuff, or saying, you're cut off from money, we're not going to give you more money,
yeah,
but it's banks that kept loaning him money. It's the courts that didn't hold him responsible, maybe individuals that didn't sue him when they should have, or
yeah,
follow
yeah,
through when they should have. um you're right. So it's a accumulation of stuff. It's not, and to me, that almost makes me feel like we have more control than we think for the next
yeah,
Donald Trump. We can stop them before they get to that
mhm,
point. We do,
yeah,
if we can recognize that we really do have the power to make a change, but we have to realize what our part was in it.
yeah,
And to do that, there has to be a
yeah,
willingness to accept some responsibility.
yeah. And I remember, it's funny because you say how like we're kind of like used to seeing like good and evil and not, trying to question it at all. And I was thinking about it that, one of the first things that really changed my point of view on like people that are like considered evil is this one documentary. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like an interview with this little girl who was like a diagnosed psychopath, I guess you could say. She
Mhm.
had tons of emotional issues, was abused from a really, really early age, um, didn't know how to handle it, and, would hurt animals, like, typical, like, if you would say serial killer stuff or, along
Right,
those
right,
lines,
yeah.
or just
Red flags.
narcissistic.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and she had like no emotion when she would talk about hurting animals or hurting, because I think she also had like an adopted brother as well that she also would hurt sometimes. So and she had like no empathy with that. And but the difference was, later, I think it was a year later, because she was, it was just at the very beginning when she was getting help. And they interviewed her a year later, and she was a completely different kid. Like completely different. Could cry, could like show emotions, could talk about things, showed like regret with animals and stuff, and could talk about like the abuse she went through and with actual emotion. It was the craziest thing. And it was eye-opening that, if because her, she was adopted and her adoptive family were really like on it as soon as she started showing these like behavior stuff. They
Right,
sent her to a place right away, got her the help she needed, and she was a completely different kid. I mean, you wouldn't have even noticed like she had been through all that, and I think they even
right,
updated it later that she's, has like a job now and is just normal. And it really did open my eyes to think, wow, like if she can change, then anybody can, anybody can be helped, you know
right,
and it
right.
is like a process, it is like multiple things, because if she didn't have a supportive family or she was in the foster care system, then she might have been like on the news, and you would have been seeing her,
Right,
do
right.
something horrific, um so yeah, so it's like we can help these people at any point. It's just recognizing the signs, when it's there.
Right. And I think that, yeah, and that it is about kind of our, because that's always been, right? There's always been people that have committed evil acts, and there's going to
Yeah.
be more. And I think it's our responsibility in it, I guess, is if we, if we're around it or exposed to it at an early point, we recognize it
Yeah.
and try to help,
Hmm.
try to intervene, try to get involved. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that that is and that's how we avoid it. We don't just tell people, we don't just punish people and just say,
Yeah.
and once it's the act is done,
Yeah.
we really need to start early and try to get this
Yeah.
stuff, before it gets to that point.
Or just
But
ignore it, when it's actually
right,
happening, when you're seeing weird stuff, like, oh, like if you're a teacher, like, oh, that kid is acting really odd, I should say something to his parents and, talk about it,
exactly.
instead of just what, teachers do sometimes, where, especially years ago, I think maybe they're better now, but, there is like a habit of just trying to ignore it. And, sometimes you have to just ignore it because you have other kids to think about.
Right.
But, they
Right.
should
Well, and
have,
yet you don't have the resources or
yeah,
whatever.
and
Yeah.
they should have procedures in place to do that, to help
Right.
kids and stuff.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think, and it is hard to get involved. It's hard
Mhm.
to call it out and stuff, but because you don't know that that person's going to grow up to be a
Yeah,
serial killer.
yeah.
But I think just it better safe than sorry. I just think
Yeah,
it's better to, call it out and, you know, think you, at least you tried, or they turned out normal anyway. At
yeah,
least, something was done so that it was, um, there was a better chance than not that they would be okay and not do something horrible.
yeah,
But yeah, so I just thought that yeah, I like talking about this because I think that, especially having gone through what we've gone through, I just think the way to not go through it again is not necessarily just to try to, um I think we can try to recognize people like Donald Trump before they get into office, and hopefully not let them get there again. But I
yeah,
think trying to recognize them when they're little Donald growing
yeah,
up to be big Donald, that's a better time. I mean, because
yeah,
even in his niece's book, it's like there's so many points. It's like, that's weird. Somebody should have
yeah,
done something then. Why
yeah.
didn't somebody say something? Why didn't somebody do something? And it's like it was the failings all along the way.
Well,
Um,
we saw it in the
and then
news
a
as
person
well.
getting more and more out of control. Pardon?
Sorry,
No, it's
we
okay.
saw it in the news as well. Like before like just when he was starting to run for office, like, oh, that's weird. He's saying that. That's weird. He's, talking about this. We should, not let him be president.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and the system. I mean, a lot of things contributed to this, but I think, man, did it open our eyes to how bad things could get, but also, you know, who is culpable and to what
Yeah.
degree. Clearly the people that were, enabling him and stuff that were at the top, they were the most culpable, but it trickles down, and it trickles down to the voter. It trickles down to even, and I think being able to kind of see, well, you know this kind of person could come at any time.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of what this looks like, and and know that it starts somewhere. It's not just
Yeah.
like this person was born an evil sob. It was a gradual, movement into, oh, now he's a, responsible for the death of like 500,000 people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For with his neglect. I mean, honestly, that he's but this was a ranching, a racketing up. It wasn't or ratcheting up. It was a ratcheting up. It wasn't just, it didn't come out of nowhere,
Yeah,
like
well,
it kind of feels that way, but it really didn't. It really didn't come out of nowhere.
yeah, well, and it's also how people, because you think of like somewhere like, like Nazi Germany, or somewhere like that, where people see it as like, oh, it just happened overnight, but it didn't. Like, it didn't happen overnight. They put in propaganda little by little, and he was slowly becoming in power. It wasn't an overnight thing.
Right. Right, right. And I think we learned that through this experience. We learned how you chip away
Yeah.
at the norms, and you chip away at people's level of outrage. You chip away at
Mhm.
everything, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
The stuff he was doing on his last day in office was not the stuff he was doing on his first day, but it was there. It was there in these
Mhm.
little tiny little ways. And again, people not holding him accountable, people not demanding he leave, people not, the press kind of been going easy on him. I mean, it was a group effort. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. Or how it got
Yeah.
where it got to. And I hope that people, when they hear this conversation, or us having this conversation, they don't think that we're saying people shouldn't be held accountable.
No.
They have to be. That's the point, is that they have to be. And had little Donald been held accountable way back when he, cheated or lied or whatever, we may not have seen this big
No.
Donald Hercules that was in
Big,
charge
big
for
baby Donald.
big baby Donald.
We would have had little baby Donald.
Exactly. A little baby Donald. So much easier to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although, yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, Cassie, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this stuff. And I hope
Welcome.
people will just take this as just something to think about. Because, like I said, I
Mhm.
think that as spiritual, poor little Lucy moping around. She's having fun.
Yeah.
She's walking really slowly, and she's old, but she's having fun. She's looking for her treats, and she likes
Yeah.
it. Um, just her thing. So don't worry. But I hope that you know I've kind of come to the conclusion for myself that it's sort of spirit, being spirit enlightened when you are able to see people as very, um, see people as multifaceted and complex, and
Yeah.
with a lot of nuance, rather than just this or this. It's never that way. And I think
Yeah.
the more we can get our heads around that, the more we'll feel like we can contribute to somebody being a better person. I
Yeah.
think it's empowering in a way, I think. Don't you think?
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
see it?
definitely. Yeah, we definitely have more control over, awful things happening, if we are more aware of these things, before they happen.
Hmm. Right, exactly. Well, thanks, Cassie. And do you want to say anything to the intuitive viewers? Because I hear all the
Well,
time that they miss you all the time.
yes, well, you can love to have you guys, come look at my channel if you're interested. I'm going to probably be putting up the next video, the Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan video, next week on Friday. I think I'm gonna do it uh once every 3 weeks on Friday, just because it takes a long time to do the videos, like for
Yeah.
research and stuff, it takes a long time. So yeah, definitely come like watch that and support, I guess.
And they're really well done, Cassie. I mean, they are I think they're so well researched and well edited, and you've really, I think, done a good job at kind of showing, the real story, and then the movie, and then kind of how they've, like you said, used film techniques and film language to kind of tell this story, and symbolism, and that
Yeah.
I find it all really fascinating. And I like that this is what you're doing. And it may not be everybody's taste, because it is about different crimes and stuff. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but um, but I think it's really good. So
Yeah. Well, and
um,
And one other thing I was just going to say really quickly is the last time we did an interview together, I talked about like a film I'm doing, like a short film
Mhm.
that I was crowdfunding for at the time, and the crowdfunder ended, and I was able to reach my goal, which I'm so happy about. So I just wanted to say, like, to anybody who donated, thank you so much for doing that and supporting the film. And we should start filming during the summer.
Awesome. I can't wait. I hope we're out there when you're filming, Cass. It'll be fun to see you film.
Yeah, I hope so too. And we'll definitely
Yeah.
take like behind the scenes pictures and stuff, because I know people have like followed our Facebook page, and we'll probably have an Instagram page at some point too.
Cool.
So
Well, good, Cass. All right, Boo Boo. I call Cassie Boo Boo, so you'll have to just ignore me calling her Boo Boo. I love you, Boo
I
Boo.
love you, boo boo.
And she calls me Boo Boo, and we call Lucy Boo Boo, and
And
everybody's Boo
now
Boo.
dad's
So
boo boo.
Dad's Boo Boo,
And
and
my
I'm sure
boyfriend is
Jamie.
boo boo as well.
It's a little confusing at Thanksgiving,
Yeah,
but
it's very confusing.
Okay, and there's little Lucy. Do you see little Lucy in the background? Okay, the family's all here. Okay,
Yeah.
hon, I will talk to you soon. Thanks, Intuitive viewers. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.